I'm Martha Zavala, president of the League of Women Voters, Pasadena area. Welcome to Thursday with the League, New Directions in Immigration. Before we get to our program, let's take a moment to acknowledge National Women's History Month and to celebrate the many contributions women have made to enrich our personal and public lives. Please read our March Voter to learn more about our impactful history-making women. But let's not stop here. We need to make history this year. The League of Women Voters and our partners must act to secure access to the ballot box and equal representation for all. There are 33 state legislatures right now acting to legalize voter suppression tactics, and we can't allow that to happen. The only solution is a federal law to stop this real steal. Please stay tuned to find out how you can help pass HR 1, the For the People Act. And now to get to the reason you're joining us this morning. We're very excited to present this timely, relevant, and important program on current developments in immigration rights and new legislation. There's a push now to actually take action on this topic. So the League of Women Voters stands in solidarity with immigrants and our partners in immigrants in the immigrants' rights community. Congress must take immediate action to pass common sense, fair immigration policies and to end the crisis at the border, end the separation of families, and provide a path to citizenship. Our speaker today, Apolonio Morales, represents CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights in Los Angeles. CHIRLA is one of our partners in the fight for immigrant rights. And you're going to learn more about that and Mr. Morales himself in a few minutes when our Immigration Committee Chair, Marianne, introduces him. In the meanwhile, I want to give you a brief summary of the program for this morning. After Mr. Morales is introduced and he puts on his presentation, he is going to spend a few minutes, about 15 minutes, answering questions from the audience. So please enter your question in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Our moderator will present the questions to Mr. Morales for his responses, and then questions the moderator may have to kind of edit the questions just to make sure we keep this thing going and we avoid duplications. We may not have time to include all the questions, so if we don't get to your question, please send it by email to us, to our events, events@lwvpa.org or immigration@lwvpa.org, and we will try to get to you an answer. Please do not enter your question or any comments in the chat box because the presenters are using that to manage our program today. So again, if you have any questions though, or any concerns about not being able to hear or anything, you're not getting the right view of the screen, you can type them into the Q&A and one of our panelists will try to help you out. So after the Q&A, I'm then going to introduce our Advocacy Committee Chair, who will inform you about our current local advocacy activities, because we really need a lot of help. We need everybody to get involved to actually make an impact for all of us. Then I will introduce the upcoming events of interest and close the meeting about 11:30. So we're going to try to stay on our schedule. And we're grateful today to Pasadena Media. They are recording this event so that we can go ahead and publish it afterward. And now let me turn the meeting over to Marianne Lutz of the Immigration Committee. She will say a few words about the committee and then introduce our speaker, Apolonio Morales. Marianne, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Martha. Good morning, everybody. The Immigration Committee is a relatively new committee to the Pasadena League of Women Voters. We've only existed for about 4 years, but we are also one of the very few leagues that actually has an immigration committee. Our committee is primarily a learning committee. We discuss past legislation and laws, current legislation and laws, and what we would like to see for the future and what is happening in the future. Immigration issues are complex and they're usually interconnected with so many other things that the committee really takes the time to disseminate what the laws are and what they actually mean right here on the ground. And we look at the current laws and proposed laws. We advocate for positive immigration policies, especially for things that will affect Southern California, because that is our home. But we also look to many other organizations and partner with other organizations that have similar humanitarian projects to deal with the immigration. We've sought to concentrate our legal and our governmental aspects on immigration. And we write to our Congress members and our local state elected officials. And we're proud to say that we have great support from all of those officials. We've learned that there are many organizations in San Gabriel Valley, throughout San Gabriel Valley, that provide services to immigrants, and we attempt to stay connected with them and work with them on a mutually beneficial basis. Our immigration committee meets monthly. We meet the first Friday of each month, and we will be meeting tomorrow, March 5th, at 1 p.m. And we invite any of you who are interested in being a part of the Immigration Committee to please join us. I'm going to place in the chat a little bit more information and an email where you can contact one of us and we can send you the link for tomorrow's meeting if you'd like to join us. As part of our mission, we seek to provide educational opportunities to league members and to the community at large, which is why today we are so proud to present to you today's speaker, Apolonio Morales, and we know him as Polo. Polo is the director of the internal affairs for CHIRLA. CHIRLA is the Coalition for Human Immigrant Rights, and it has been empowering immigrants to push policies that promote freedom for movement, full human rights, and the vigorous civic action that strengthens this democracy for more than 30 years. CHIRLA was founded in 1986. Its mission is to achieve a just society fully inclusive of immigrants. And it works very hard to do just that. It has become one of the largest, most effective advocates for immigration rights, organizing, educating, defending immigrants and refugees in our streets, in our courts, and through the power of the community. Its civically engaged immigrants and its families work for a world where they are free to move, to participate in democracy, and to enjoy human rights. CHIRLA takes its cue from the power of love, its vision for its community to organize and to build power among people, institutions, and coalitions to change the public opinion and craft progressive policies for full human, civil, and labor rights for everybody. This is an organization I think we can all jump behind. Now, Polo joined CHIRLA in 2014 as the political director, and he transitioned to external affairs director in 2019. Before that, he was a labor organizer for the California Nurses Association and United Steelworkers Healthcare Workers Alliance, and a community organizer for Contra Costa Interfaith Supporting Community Organization, and Berkeley Organizing Congregationals for Action. So he's been very involved. He has served as the interim director for Berkeley Organizing Congregations for Action, and he was a national immigration organizer for Faith in Action's Campaign for Citizenship. He is the child of undocumented immigrants, and he has dedicated his life to advancing pro-immigrant policies and changing the anti-immigration narrative here in the United States. He graduated from the University of Berkeley with a BA in English in 1999, and he is also a member of the commissioner member of the California Citizens Redistricting Committee, something that is going to be very important for our community moving forward. With that, I would like to introduce to you Polo Morales.
Thank you very much for having me here today. I don't think I can turn on my video camera, but okay. And just a clarification a little bit on, I'm a commissioner for the Los Angeles County Citizens Redistricting Commission, just to clarify that. So the state is a whole other thing. But thank you for the invitation. I want to make sure that we have a very clear understanding of where things are at. Oh, there's my video. Where things are at with the issue of immigration. And so after 4 years under the Trump administration, now there is a possibility to address the issue through many vehicles. So what I'm going to do today is talk about the campaign that we're involved in called Yes Immigrants Forward. It's a statewide campaign with faith, community, immigrant rights organizations, refugee resettlement, asylee serving organizations, labor all across the state, to be able to address this issue once and for all. And so to get immigration reform done for the 11 million undocumented. California is important, and we'll get into that as soon as I give my presentation here. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get started. Okay. All right. So let me move some stuff out of the way. Okay, here we go. So the Yes Immigrants Forward campaign is something that began last September. So September 2020, when we saw, the polling, that had come out, that there was this big giant tidal wave coming of Democratic support. And so we started organizing organizations across the state to have a conversation about, okay, let's say the polling is correct, number one. Number two, if the results are what we think they're going to be, then we will have a President Biden, a Vice President Kamala Harris. We will have a House majority and a Senate majority, which would open up an opportunity to pass immigration reform. And so to that end, what we decided to do is to have conversations about what it is that we would be advocating for. And so that conversation turned into the Yes Immigrants Forward campaign. And so we had a policy framework that we had agreed to be able to discuss what it was that we wanted to be included in a large immigration reform package, and what are some of the issues related to enforcement that we wanted to address as well, that were happening under the Trump administration. And so that's how the campaign came about. We launched back in December 15th. And so we've been organizing actions and events across the state to ensure that the issue of immigration continues to be at the forefront. So I'm going to go ahead and give an overview of what it is that we're advocating for, where we're at politically, and where things stand for the near future. Okay, so the campaign goals was, again, to pass immigration reform rooted in family unity. We wanted it to demand a moratorium on enforcement, and this is something that President Biden did move forward. There's some stuff in the courts preventing that from happening, but we'll get to that. We would create change through the federal executive branch. So that would be, the political power of the President of the United States. We would then focus on a registry update, which is, we're not going to be focusing too much on that at this moment in time, but I will touch upon it briefly. So we want to make sure that any legalization program must protect the sanctity of the family unit. So expanding the definition of family to modern norms, so inclusive of the LGBTQ plus community, and include those family members in deportation proceedings. So the folks that were either on their way to be deported, folks that had been deported, need to be taken into account. And then that it would be inclusive of the 11 million immigrants in the United States. We wanted to demand a moratorium on enforcement. Right now, what we have, especially down in Adelanto and other detention centers, is a COVID-19 outbreak. So folks are getting sick thanks to a legal case. Folks are being allowed to be released, to lower the numbers in these massive detention centers in order to protect them from catching COVID or spreading it amongst other folks. And so there's also all these issues that have taken place within detention centers. And so for us, this is a system that is not serving anybody any good. And it's actually, working, part of the larger, enforcement and deportation machine that exists in the United States, which is, being led at the forefront by private detention centers. We wanted to make sure that the president acted with executive power, that, the DACA program, that the temporary protective status programs, that all these anti-immigrant orders that were signed by President Trump would be reversed and rolled back. We also wanted to see a rollback of the Muslim ban, the travel ban, and the Remain in Mexico policy, or MPP. And so these are some of the things that we'll discuss in terms of what the president can actually do with his executive powers. And so the political update, in case you don't know, but you should know because you're the League of Women Voters, this is the current makeup of the Senate and the House. So there's 222 Democrats, 213 Republicans. There's 50-50 in the Senate, with the tiebreaker being Vice President Kamala Harris. And we know who's president and vice president of the US currently. So why is it important to have Vice President Kamala Harris? Well, she has the president's ear, number one. Number two, she's always been a champion for immigrant rights. And so when she first got elected as state senator, the first press conference that she had was at CHIRLA. So she came to our offices and she thanked the Latino and the immigrant community for their support in sending her to Washington, D.C. And so we've remained very close to her for many, many years in order to move immigration reform, or try to move immigration reform policies forward. And so let's move on here. The power of the pen. And so President Biden, just as President Trump, had executive powers, things that he could do administratively to change immigration policy. And so some of the things that he undid, President Biden is reintroducing and revitalizing. And so that would include the DACA program. So that has been renewed. So if we had a, have you done your homework assignment, Mr. President? This is what it would look like. We don't have an update on the TPS program yet. That could be because there's legislation that's moving in the House of Representatives. The asylum changes to MPP, that's being explored. And we are seeing some signs of life today in terms of how folks are processed at the border, or their southern border, who are seeking asylum. So that's good news and a step forward. Ending the Muslim ban, changed it, got rid of it, and then stopping deportations for the first 100 days. This is currently being held up by a judge. It was supposed to be for 2 weeks, and then they extended it out for another 2 weeks. And so this is something that's going to be fought for in the courts. Ultimately, now that we have a Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Ali Mayorkas, has the power to prioritize or not prioritize certain types of deportations. And so if you're a mother dropping your children off at school, are you really a danger or a threat to the United States? More than likely not. So you would be considered a low priority. So there is still some administrative changes within ICE, within the Department of Homeland Security, with somebody that understands a humanitarian approach to immigration, somebody that used to work for USCIS, which is always the place where you submit your N-400, your citizenship status change form, or become lawful permanent resident. It's a different approach than what we've seen before in the past. We did have the immigration reform bill that was introduced, at least in theory. This became the US Citizenship Act of 2021. And so what President Biden's roadmap to citizenship for undocumented immigrants look like, it looks exactly like what the US Citizenship Act looks like as well. So there's an 8-year road to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. There's a 5-year temporary status, similar to DACA. So you get like a work permit. We know you're here. We're not going to deport you. 3 years of lawful permanent residency after the 5-year mark. And after 3 years of lawful permanent residency, you can apply for citizenship if you came to the US prior to January 1st, 2021. And so this is a great advancement in terms of the time frame. In the 2013 bill, it was like a 13 to 15 year wait to become a citizen. This is a much shorter path, still not very short to many people, obviously, but it is a shorter path to citizenship. The good news within the bill and President Biden's proposed ideas is that there's a fast track for Daca recipients, agricultural workers, TPS recipients. And so if you have a status in the US that is a temporary protective status, then you are fast tracked for a lawful permanent residency status, which means that you can become a citizen within the next 3 years. And so a much shorter path than the 8-year path. But yeah, you become a resident and then you can apply for citizenship, become a citizen within 3 years. And so this would impact millions of people across the country. So the other is those deported under the Trump administration can apply to come back with a waiver for family unity reasons or other humanitarian reasons. Some folks were deported, but they have an autistic child they had to leave behind. This would allow for them to petition the government to come back. One of the more humanitarian approaches in terms of language that is used is it would change the term alien to non-citizen in immigration laws. Okay. What else is in here is it would eliminate the 3 and 10-year ban. And so what that does is if you come to the US, you were deported, and then you came back, there's either a 3 or 10-year ban for you in order to have somebody petition for you to adjust your status. And so this has prevented hundreds of thousands of folks, for many, many years from actually adjusting their status to become lawful permanent residents, then citizens of the US. And so they would have to wait in their home country. So the idea would be to have folks be able to petition, be sponsored here in the US and not have to leave their country, not have to leave the US to their home country for 10 years. And so that would be eliminated. It would explicitly include permanent partnerships and eliminates discrimination against LGBTQIA. So this would be under family-based immigration. So if you're married to a same-sex couple situation, then you would be treated as a married couple, which is has not always been so in the past. And then lastly, would protect family members of Filipino veterans who fought in the US who were undocumented. These protections were revoked under Trump, and these would be included once again. So these were some of the ideas that were presented. And so we actually had the introduction of the US Citizenship Act by Congresswoman Linda Sanchez from California and Senator Bob Menendez in the Senate from New Jersey. And so this is important because what you have in every piece of legislation is co-sponsors from representatives that from largely impacted states. And so the folks that want to see immigration reform see the value in the adjustment of status for the undocumented, for dreamers, for TPS holders, for folks that are seeking asylum. There has to be a change in the way the system functions because we know how essential immigrant workers have been to our country. And so if that wasn't clear to anybody before that, it definitely became very clear during the pandemic. And so this community has been the hardest hit, one of the hardest hit communities with the most deaths due to COVID-19, and infection rates. So this is very important for us to be able to address what our economic relief and recovery can look like, which gets us into, and I'll go into more detail in terms of the time frame for these bills, but this leads us to the introduction of the Essential Workers Bill. And so Congressman Joaquin Castro from Texas, another heavily state in terms of the undocumented population, and Senator Alex Padilla in the Senate will be introducing tomorrow. This is what we're hearing the latest. It's been a little postponed from last Friday to Monday to now Friday again this week. And if all goes well, this bill will be introduced tomorrow. The Essential Workers Bill is basically saying there are frontline workers during this pandemic that deserve a path to citizenship. And so because of that, potentially this could adjust the status of somewhere between 5 to 7 million people. And so if this moves forward, we would still have a lot of folks that would remain undocumented in the United States, but it would get us one step closer to adjusting the status for the 11 million. And so I'm going to talk about how these bills and what's the plan for them. But bear with me in this cartoon here. So how are these bills going to pass, knowing what we know in terms of the makeup of the Senate and the House of Representatives? And so in January, we began a process of discussing the appropriations bill. So it's basically the budget for 2021 that has been kicked down the line for many, many months now. And the idea was to include any one of these bills. So HR 6 is the Dream and Promise Act, which is for dreamers and folks that have TPS. So somewhere between 2 to 3, 2.4 million folks would be able to benefit from that. The Farm Workers Modernization Act, which would, help about over 1.5 million folks would qualify for this particular legalization effort, and the essential workers, another 5 million. So if you add them all together, and if you were able to put them into this reconciliation process, because they are necessary for our relief and recovery, or recovery from this pandemic, that this would be an opportunity to do that. And so then we would get it into the Senate to be able to pass with a simple majority of 50 plus 1. And so with 218 votes in the House to get it out of the House. And so the tiebreaker being Senator Kamala Harris as tiebreaker here. But what we saw in this last vote out of the House of Representatives just very recently is, okay, so the bill made it out, but there was no inclusion of any of these pieces of legislation. And so, but there may be a second opportunity down the line. This reconciliation process is going to go back and forth a little bit. And there may be other potential opportunities in the fall of this year as well for fiscal year 2022. And so again, these are reconciliation bills. So simple majority, 50% plus 1 gets you a win. In the Senate, you don't need 60 votes for the filibuster. You can pass these pieces of legislation. So that would be where ideally a simpler way of passing immigration reform, not inclusive of everybody, but definitely much more inclusive than trying to get those 60 votes to even talk about the bill in the Senate. And so when we talk about what's happening with the campaign, if you look at early March 2021, we have congressional town halls that have been taking place all week this week in different parts of California. So we had Representative Takano on Monday. We had Representative Linda Sanchez talk about the bill, and Veronica Escobar from Texas also talk about the US Citizenship Act. And so we've been building momentum. We have about 3 more town halls for this Friday scheduled, all around 5:30 or 6 p.m., depending. And so again, to keep this issue moving forward and alive. And so I just want to draw your attention here to March 14th, which is when the stimulus reconciliation vote is the deadline, because unemployment benefits will be running out. And so something needs to be done. And this reconciliation vote and the stimulus and everything that's attached to it needs to pass in order to prevent that from having a lot of folks, miss out on unemployment benefits as we're trying to recover from this pandemic. And so that is a key vote. We're going to move forward beyond that. We didn't include any immigration reform in that particular process, but the next date that is going to be important is March 30th. And so some of these bills that are being reintroduced just this week are going for a vote sometime in mid-March. So sometime around March 15th that week, there's going to be a vote on, the Dream and Promise Act, so HR 6. There's going to be a vote, on the Farm Workers Modernization Act. There may be, depending on where things stand, potentially even a vote on essential workers. All this to say that the 2 bills, Dream and Promise and the Farm Workers Act, Modernization Act, if they get passed before the 30th, then there's no need for significant changes or to have them go through committee process or any of that, because they've already been passed in the previous Congress. And so technically they kind of carry over into this year. And so the idea would be to get them passed before the 30th, so you don't have to worry about elongating the process for these smaller pieces of legislation. And so again, this would only target, it's what we call the piecemeal approach. So like pieces of immigration reform can move forward out of the House. The US Citizenship Act is inclusive of these pieces of immigration reform, but it's for the 11 million. So it's everybody. And so as we enter into April, mid-April, and to May 1st is the 100-day mark for President Biden's, the first 100 days of his presidency. And so we want to see that immigration reform has moved forward and taken a big step forward, because it is a campaign promise that was made by President Biden, but not just by President Biden. It was also made by a whole lot of Democratic members of Congress, in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. So if we don't go through the reconciliation process now or in the near future, then we have to go the old-fashioned traditional way, which is you introduce the immigration reform bill, the bill gets marked up with things that we like and things that we don't like, and then it goes to the Senate. If it passes the House, it'll go to the Senate. We're expecting this vote, from what we're hearing. It may be taking place sometime in April or May, for this larger U.S. Citizenship Act bill. And so if we look at the time frame, that's how the wheels of democracy work, but we would need 60 votes to pass the filibuster threshold, which means that 10 Republicans would have to say, yes, let's talk about the bill, and then we can debate about the merits and what we want to include in it. If that doesn't happen, then again, it gets very increasingly difficult to pass immigration reform, because the only way is through some other reconciliation process vote in the near future. But this would be the traditional way, unless also the Democrats get rid of the filibuster. And for those of you that follow politics, there's a couple, at least two senators that are unwilling to get rid of the filibuster. And so the question is going to be, if there's going to be Republican obstruction in passing, not just immigration reform, but other pieces of legislation, then will the Democrats reconsider? And so at this point, we don't have quite the answer to that question. So there's at least two senators that need to think about the future of the Democratic Party, number one. Number two, they also have to think about their political careers in terms of what that means. And so at this point in time, we don't see the filibuster rule or approach as being off the table, and unless something dramatically changes, right? So we're keeping a very close eye on what's happening with other bills, but what we really want to make sure at the end of the day is that we get immigration reform passed. And so again, the U.S. Citizenship Act may be pushed into April, May, and the other bills may be getting a vote as soon as the week of March 15th. And so for us, we want to make sure that all pieces of immigration reform legislation are moving forward, whether it's the larger piece or the smaller pieces of legislation to lead up to the 11 million. I apologize, my dogs are here next to me if you're hearing some toys. I'm going to see what I can do about that. Okay, let's move on. I'm almost finished here with this presentation. And so the question is, how can you get involved? And so as we grow the number of organizations that are part of the Yes Immigrants campaign, we want to make sure that folks know that there's a petition that we have. So as individuals, folks can sign a petition to say, yes, we want to see immigration reform done. We want to make sure it's inclusive of the 11 million. And then we have 100 days, 100 stories. So if you follow the campaign or CHIRLA, every day we're posting a new story of an impacted community member to make sure that folks see and hear the folks that need immigration reform. And so, we want to make sure that folks are stepping out of the shadows in that regard. This week, again, we have town halls. President Biden's 50-day mark is on March 11th. We're actually organizing an action here in Los Angeles from MacArthur Park to, this is with SEIU 721 taking the lead and other SEIU locals to mark the 50-day mark for President Biden's presidency. And then we have a relay on March 22nd, I should say 22nd, not 22nd, and through the 24th from Sacramento all the way down to San Bernardino. And then again, continuing the drumbeat to pass immigration reform. I'm going to go ahead and stop here for any questions, and then I'm going to go ahead and take down the presentation.
Thank you, Polo. That was a great presentation. And now we will go to questions. I do have, the first question is about the slide presentation and if we can have a copy of it. And you have given that to the league. So we'll put in the chat, but you can obtain a copy of it through the League Immigration Committee, and I'll put the information of how to get that in the chat in just a minute. The next question we have for you is how much of your budget is actually spent for to pay lawyers to represent immigrants and the courts in the courts?
How much of our budget? That's a question I don't have an answer to. I'm not in the finance department and I'm not an attorney for CHIRLA. But I can tell you we do get funding from the state of California for it's from CDSS, Department of Social Services. What it does is it allows us to provide help to community members to adjust their, to file for lawful permanent residency or citizenship or Daca renewals or initial applications for Daca, family visas, U visas. And so what that allows us is we don't charge community members, like they still have to pay the cost of the application, but we can provide that service for free. And so that question I can't answer. In terms of our finances for attorneys, I'm not the finance department, so I can't answer that question.
Who do you expect the most opposition from?
So we have gotten, as traditionally, a lot of opposition from some of the more anti-immigrant elements. And so the same folks that stormed the Capitol are the same folks that have always been there in terms of their anti-immigrant stance. And so the issue of immigration is one that's used as a political piñata, if you will, something that can be brought up again and again to demonize a segment of the population for political gain. And so we saw that under the Trump administration, how the anti-immigrant perspective really blew up, and it's continued to grow for many years. But we have been making some great strides in changing the narrative and getting folks to understand that immigrants are essential, right, to our economies. They are essential to our communities. There are folks that are retiring now that never got a chance to change their status. And so this is the situation that we find ourselves in, is what do we do, given where we're at this moment in time with the opportunity in front of us, but also to remember the folks that, some folks have even passed away, who have dedicated their life to working here in the United States without ever seeing the benefit of U.S. citizenship.
Another question is, you talked about workers as being essential. Can you tell us what are essential workers, or what are the jobs for essential workers?
So essential workers would be, and it depends on the definition at the end of the day. So once we see the bill itself, the language on what they deem, Senator Padilla and Senator Castro deem as essential, we'll be able to get a better definition. But the working definition for now are folks at the front line. So grocery workers, restaurant workers, folks that are, folks that work in agriculture in the fields, folks that work in the health industry, that are, folks that have, Daca are able to work because of the work permit that they have in different sectors and different, industries. And so that is not just limited to folks that have protective status currently, but also the undocumented. And so depending on that definition, it could be somewhere around 5 million folks that would benefit from this, to maybe a little more than that. But we'll find out tomorrow for sure.
Another question that we have is, it is very expensive to go through the process of citizenship. And so the question is, what kind of resources are being available to offset these expenses, or do you know of any organizations that help offset these expenses?
Yeah, definitely. So there are some, there's been in the past, the state has provided some funds to be able to pay for, let's say, Daca applications. And so Daca applications are $500. The citizenship applications are $725. And so what we had before the changes by the Trump administration, or the attempts to change, was the way that exemptions were made in terms of how much you would pay, right? Depending on where you fall on the income scale. And so it may be less than that for you. It may be, $725. And so what we relied on in the past is to have either some wealthy individual donate money to be able to help out in the cost of folks to be able to adjust their status. The reality is at $500 a piece, there's only so much you can do. Or $725, there's only so much you can do. So it really comes down to the donations that folks have given in the past, or some kind of a state funding mechanism, or even exploring that at the county level. Is can we actually help adjust the status of undocumented immigrants, or DACA folks or TPS folks, because we know how essential they are, again, to our local economies. And so immigrants pay taxes, but the benefits that come back don't come back in the same way. And so that's the question for us to answer is, as we enter into the adjustment of status, as we pass immigration reform, is our infrastructure, is it readily available for folks to be able to move in the direction of adjustment of status, or are there, can we do more? And so those are the questions we're gonna have to answer ourselves.
There's a lot of concern about the children that have been separated at the border and the unaccompanied minors. And so one of the questions is, what's happening with that? What do you know about it?
Yeah, so as far as we know, there's been a task force that has been created. And so that task force is supposed to be reuniting those families. From what we've gotten from the administration is that at least 100 children have been reunited with their family members. And so that is a step in the right direction. The way that families are treated at the border, there's what's called the Flores Agreement. And the Flores Agreement states that you can't keep children for more than 20 days in detention. You have to, once they're in, then you have to get them out. And so under the Trump administration, that agreement was thrown out the window. And then, family members were given the option, if they had two children, they had to choose, between the one or the two, right, to be separated from, or go back to their home country and leave the children there. And so there was all these decisions that were placed upon immigrants seeking asylum at our southern border. And so that created a backlog, a huge mess, and the separation that we saw under the Trump administration, which was something horrible. The attempt from the Biden administration is a step in the right direction, and in the processing of folks seeking asylum as well. And so, we still have COVID restrictions, obviously, so the administration has made that very clear. But it seems like they're going into the direction of being more humane for folks seeking asylum at our southern border than we had in the previous administration.
We continue to get more questions about the financial aspect of helping immigrants. And so I'm going to, as just a share some information with everybody about that. There's an organization here in San Gabriel Valley called the Immigration Resource Center of San Gabriel Valley. It is a nonprofit. Its home is in Monrovia, and it works with immigrants to do the legal work for them and with them. And it is low cost and sometimes no cost. So I'll put that in the chat, the link to their website. So if anybody knows somebody who needs assistance in San Gabriel Valley, Immigration Resource Center is available to them. One of the questions about the financial help is directed to the immigrants of Central and South American countries, and how much US aid goes to that country. Why can't it help with this, with the efforts to bring them to America?
Yeah, so the US Citizenship Act does include some funding mechanism for Central Americans, countries in the triangle down there, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala. And so, there's always caveats and strings attached to the funding that is given to Central America. And we've seen in the past how, even the best efforts to do this may not reap the results because, the history of the United States involvement in Central America. So I'll just leave it at that. You can research that on your own. We won't get into that. But that's something that we need to look into a little bit deeper, is how funds from the US would be able to address some of the systemic issues that exist in these countries that result in folks seeking a better life or folks escaping violence from their home countries. And so that's one. I'll say the other is this administration is trying to figure out on how to create programs where folks in their home country can apply for asylum, or be able to petition for their children to be go to a safer place from the home country, as opposed to going to the southern border. So this is something, again, that is being explored, some of these thoughts and ideas, but it's something that we definitely need to recognize that there's an issue that needs to be resolved. Economically, economic incentives may help, and then there's also the root causes of migration that need to be explored further. So there's definitely, it's included. Is it going to be enough? And will this, make a dent on the issues in Central America? We have to continue to explore that and have a conversation around it, I believe.
Right. A lot of people think of immigration as being a humanitarian issue, which I think we would all agree it is, but we can't ignore the fact that it's also a political issue, particularly in our country. You mentioned the filibuster as a discussion with regard to the immigration reform. Do you believe that immigration reform cannot happen unless the filibuster is eliminated?
I think it is an issue that for Republicans, at least, to consider. And it depends really on which side of the coin they're going to land on in this, who's going to lead the Republican Party, right? And in the 1980s, you had Ronald Reagan, who was a big proponent of, immigration reform. And so that was the 86 amnesty that came about from that. You have had supportive senators in the past. We've actually seen the bill pass in the Senate, which was much more robust than what this bill is in the Us Citizenship Act, with Republican support. And then when it came to the House, that's what, the House had a majority Republican back in 2013, so they weren't able to move forward with it and have a vote on it. So this seems to be a different situation that we find ourselves in. So the filibuster conversation is really coming down to a question of how many Republicans can you get that are interested in addressing these issues. A lot of these issues are important to Republicans, but politically, that's the question for them: is are they aligning with the Trump faction within their party, or are they going back to their conservative core values and principles? That remains to be seen. Is it absolutely necessary to reach the 10 senators to pass immigration reform? We believe that it's not. Actually, through that reconciliation process, and again, as long as the parliamentarian says it's okay, right? Because we saw what happened with minimum wage. But because it's a work specific, the essential workers are essential, that the argument in the case can be made for that. And so that's a good thing. But will it fall short of including everybody at the end of the day? Or can we build on the wins of these pieces of legislation? So, I believe that Republicans do care about this issue and they want to resolve it. But then this issue has always been used as a political football. So it goes back and forth, to try to maintain and have power and representation in the Senate and the House. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the folks that have voted for this already, that are Republicans, choosing not to, or choosing not to vote in favor of bringing the conversation to the floor in the Senate.
The bigger picture, probably the harder picture of immigration and migration is, how does it get managed? And how can we look at the root causes of it? And is CHIRLA looking at that? What can you share with us about that?
Yeah, so we have been doing outreach out of near the Central American border to figure out exactly what's going on, why folks are leaving. Majority has to do with, with violence. And so the root causes of that violence are, violence that we actually deported into Central American countries. So folks, were sent back, and, it worsened situation for folks. Yes, root causes are something that we always pay attention to, and then we look at in terms of addressing those root causes. It's going to take the willingness of the governments, the infrastructure that they have built, I always take a look at other countries that are not in Central America and say, why don't we see so many Costa Ricans coming to the U.S., to our southern border? And it's usually because they have very strong economies, they have jobs, they have education, they have these are beautiful places, outside of maybe the violence that exists. A lot of folks that you talk to don't want to leave their homeland. They are stuck. Either they leave or they face death. Well, either they leave or they starve. So there's real reasons as to why people are leaving. And again, whatever we can do to figure that out would be one step forward. Is it going to be resolved with one bill? That remains to be seen. But it is something that we have to address, right? Our asylum process, if we were facing the same type of uncertainty and violence in our country, and we would be seeking asylum in other countries, how would people treat us? And I think we have to ask ourselves that question when we think about the folks that are seeking asylum from Central America.
The media is talking about the flood of children coming across the border unaccompanied, being sent by their parents. Yeah. And again, it's about managing and maybe even the media discussing how the media presents this. Does CHIRLA, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we always talk about, people's right to migrate, people's right to be able to seek a better life and opportunity for their children. It's the same reason why, some of our grandparents or great parents or great grandparents or great grandparents came to the U.S. to begin with. Back then, even up until the 1800s, all you needed was a letter stating that you wanted to be a citizen to become a citizen. You didn't have to go through a citizenship test. You didn't have to know anything about the U.S. history, of the U.S. You didn't have to pay a fee, pretty much. And so those days have changed, right? And so now we have a much more complicated system, and seeking, through, to be able to apply for this, citizenship of the United States is really at the mercy of whether a law is passed or not. And so we are in different times. However, we would all benefit from having immigration reform, because it would create that sense of stability for families that are already here. And it would also address mechanisms that we can create for folks that are seeking asylum or seeking protections when they come to our southern border. So unless we have those things in place, and a conversation around, future flow, is it economic, right? Do we need X number of workers this year? My grandfather was a bracero. He was able to come to the U.S., work for a few months, and go back to his little town in Mexico. There were mechanisms, there were ways to approach it, which are, I think have always been on the table in terms of a discussion. And again, we have to be as creative as, folks in the past have been when it comes to immigration.
One of the topics that our immigration committee has talked about is there's the topics that we've been talking about, the big things that are coming through the media and that we saw the last administration do to hurt immigration. And we are hearing about things that this new administration wants to do, again, the big topics. But there's a lot of things that happened with the last administration that are obstacles that came that did not get a lot of media attention. One of which is the judges in the immigration courts and the way that they've been dealt with. Can you speak to the judges in the immigration courts, maybe explain to what has occurred and what we think the new administration will be doing in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. So, we always forget this, is that whether you're seeking asylum or refugee status in the US, you are vetted. And so you have to prove that there's violence against your family in your home country, right? Some folks have to literally demonstrate the scars from stabbings and shootings to be able to qualify for asylum status. And so what we have in the US is a backlog of folks that have been asking for this type of support from the US. In terms of judges. So judges have long, cases that move very slowly through the system. And so the administration, the Biden administration, has been talking about increasing the number of judges to be able to address these questions. And so then that vetting process plays out, that official seal from the judge to move the case forward becomes can be fast tracked a little more than what it has been in the past. And so again, these are systems that can be fixed, that can address the concerns that maybe other folks in the U.S. have about who's seeking asylum at our southern border. But there is a process, and folks have to. It's a very high bar for folks to be able to qualify for that. And so under the Trump administration, they made some administrative changes that didn't take into consideration, some of the violence that some of these families faced. And so now they're stuck, in Mexico, waiting for their day in court. And again, if you elongate the process because of various reasons, it takes longer for folks to get through to be able to get that asylum at the end of the day. And so that's one of the things that we're looking forward to seeing is more ways to address these backlogs.
There's a question regarding the children, wanting more detail about the children, unaccompanied children, and what the Biden administration will do for them. So it's kind of a narrowed question. Do you expect the Biden administration to send these children back to their parents, or do you expect them to do something else similar to what the previous administration did?
From what we're hearing is that the children of the families that were separated that are being reunited, they're being reunited here in the U.S. and they're being granted, the ability to stay. And so we don't have enough information yet in terms of how practically that works, right? But at least the 500 children that their parents were separated from their parents that it's very difficult to find their parents because they were deported back to the home countries, or they just can't find them. That is at least one way that the administration is addressing this, is the folks that were separated, the kids that were separated that are reunited can now stay in the United States. But outside of that, I don't have enough information at this point in time to see what the practical application is for the near future. However, we're starting to see some more developments happening on our southern border. There's some stories that came out today, just in terms of the processing for folks. And again, it's really vetting, processing, all that is part of the equation. We can't forget that.
We have one last question that I think will be a quick answer for you, and then we're going to wrap up. It's a follow-up as to the judges. Do you think the immigration judges and the courts should be moved back to the big judicial branch? And I guess you should first say that they were removed from the big judicial branch and set separately years ago. And so that will be our final question.
Yeah, I think that question is probably beyond me right now. So I don't have an answer for that question. I know that it would help to have more judges focus on the issue of immigration, that it would be a greater benefit to be able to process these cases in a timely manner, to be able to address these issues, the underlying issues. So I don't believe I have an answer for that question, unfortunately.
Polo, we appreciate so much your insight, your knowledge, and sharing it with us. And I just want to say to all the attendees, if you have additional questions today, you can send them to the League of Women Voters. We'll get them to Polo and try to get the answers to you as quickly as possible. And I'll send that email in the chat in a couple of minutes. But we want to thank you for that. And I will turn the meeting back over to Martha.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm here. I need someone to help me with my video. But thank you very much for your talk, Apolonio. Immigrant rights are, near and dear to me because I'm a daughter of immigrants and a sister of immigrants. My family traveled up and down Alta in Baja California. So I have some of my siblings were actually one younger than I am, born in Mexico. Um, my grandfather first crossed over in 1924 with my father, who was 6 years old at the time. So the history and the flexibility of the way they treated immigrant workers at the time, we definitely benefited by that. I happened to also be working in an HR operation during 1986 and had the pleasure of helping so many people change their records because they were basically able to come out of the shadows. They had been contributing members, taxpayers, and all of that, and meant no harm. I don't know how many of you were alive in 1986, but the world didn't fall apart with that amnesty program. So I think that that's an important thing, that we have history with this, and it was a very successful program. And hopefully we can get, we can help get this legislation passed. So really, thank you very much for your talk and for giving the league members an opportunity to take part in really making democracy work for all residents in this country. So it's not enough to inform ourselves. We really need to take action. So thank you. We look forward to continuing our partnership with CHIRLA. Thank you very much. And hopefully you'll come back and visit us again. And now I'd like to turn this over to our advocacy chair, Anita Mackey. So please hang in there with us. There's work to be done and you need to hear about this. Anita, take it away. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I have 3 things for you to do today. One is to go to the website for CHIRLA that's been up already, www.chirla.org/whatwedo/campaigns, and sign their petition. The League of Women Voters US is supporting the same list of bills important to CHIRLA, including the bill that Senator Padilla will announce tomorrow. The second thing we would like you to do is to go to the National League website, which is lwv.org, and take action on HB1 for the People Act. The House passed it last night, and the push now will be to get the Senate to do it. And thirdly, I'd like you to go to our local league website, lwv-pa.org. Check out the March Voter, especially the article, What's Next in Housing, where you will find information on the number of new housing units that will be required for each community in our league. Then find out what your community is doing to get input from its residents and take part in those meetings. Housing and advocacy would like your feedback on those meetings. And in either case, you could reach out to me and I will try to keep track of where everybody's going on those issues. Thank you. It's a long list, I understand, but they're all pretty easy things to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you very much. I think that what Anita said, I'm really anxious for us to have that For the People Act passed, because right now, because of the end of the census and the numbers are going to come out, the number of representatives that California is going to have in Congress is going to be very, very important. And as I mentioned before, the state legislatures are the ones who draw the maps. We're going through that process right now. Apolonio mentioned that he's on the commission for the LA County maps for our supervisorial districts. And so for our congressional districts, we really need to make sure that the way that California draws its maps is replicated throughout the other 49 states. And this is what this act will do. We need to make sure that everybody gets equal representation, because depending on how you draw the maps, you can really, really take power away from a group of people. It's all about political power. Already, if we didn't get our counts in, we've, probably going to find out how we did in terms of funding. So we know we're probably scheduled to lose some representatives, some seats. But what we need to do is make sure that the maps that are drawn are fair. And that needs to be done everywhere, because that way everybody gets equal representation, as I mentioned before. So one of the good pieces of information that Anita passed on was that, the House did pass their part, pass the bill, but it's now in the Senate, and that's where all the work needs to be done. So we still have our work cut out for us. So keep that in mind. And then I want to, finally, I would like to share some information about upcoming events. I think there is a slide to help me kind of bring up this information. If we can have the slide up, please, because we are going to be hosting another League at Night. I know that some of you may have attended those in the past, but we're going to start up again with our first League at Night on March 18th. And so hopefully you will be able to join us to hear about climate action plans and what they are. Basically, every city is supposed to have a climate action plan, because we have in the League, it's stated that it's one of the primary missions that we have to take action on climate change. And so we would be hearing, I think you see this up in front of you coming up on another slide about that action. So if you don't see it on the slide, we can certainly type it in to share with you in the chat, if somebody would do that. And also you can come to our website and look at our events page, and you will see that there. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, you won't really see anything on there, is really important that the Pasadena Jewish Temple is sponsoring a slideshow about immigrants and refugees. And that's going to be, I believe, March 7th. Again, we can put that in the chat if we can get that information. Bonnie Skolnick, if you're out there, please type that in, and we can make sure everybody gets it. And then lastly, I want to talk to our members. We are having our first ever speakeasy Saturday, March 6th. That's this Saturday coming up in 2 days. And we would like you all to sign up for that speakeasy, where we get a chance to catch up and kind of rededicate our commitment to each other and to our work. So I'm kind of looking forward to a really fun evening. So please, you can find that also on our March voter and in our events page, so that hopefully you will join us for a fun evening. And so thank you all for joining us. Now we hope to see you again at one of the public events that I just mentioned. And to keep informed about our League's activities, make sure you go to our website. We will put that information there. We've also featured some amazing women who have been firsts in their field and have made history as a result. So please come and take a look at that. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And today's program, again, as mentioned, it was broadcast by Pasadena Media over public access channels. And it's also recorded, and the video is going to be posted on our YouTube channel, which you can access on our landing page. So again, thank you everybody for sharing your morning with us, and we hope to see you again at our next event. Have a great day. Thank you.